Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, January 17th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 229 days. The game is against Michigan in 314 days. There are a lot of different subsets of the college football offseason, the crazy coaching carousel season, the post-bowl transfer season, National Signing Day, winter workout, spring football, and so much more. Here in mid-January, it is officially way too early top 25 season. Is a chance to take a first look at the following season and which teams might have a shot to end up near the top of the rankings. Our old friend Bill Bender just put together one of those way too early top 25s at the Sporting News. He's my guest this morning. Bill, thanks for joining me.
Tom, I just got out and back from Indy, and you've got a 229-day countdown. I mean, give me like a week of rest. No, it was a good end of the season, and we're happy to already look ahead to 2022 as we have already.
I got to tell you, I always get a little FOMO, a little jealousy watching, major college football events happen without me there. The college football playoff this year was kind of like, oh, it's kind of sad. But I don't know if I was more jealous at any point than when they showed the St. Elmo shrimp cocktail in the press box, the national championship game. It was like, oh man, now I'm bummed. How was the shrimp cocktail?
Yeah, we definitely made sure to get some at halftime. A rock fight otherwise, kind of amusing watching SEC fans bundle up in Indy. It was cold. Like, even as a Big Ten, it was cold on game day. The wind was really whipping, but they played the game inside. And obviously good for Georgia. I think in some ways that's good for the sport when you have a school that hasn't won one in 41 years, bring one home. So well done by Stetson Bennett, that defense, getting it done on Monday night.
Yeah, it was kind of nice. It was kind of a funny meme to 1980 Georgia, because it was like they'd gotten so close so many times that it was a little bit funny, but it was also a little bit mean. And so, good for them to win. I'm sure they would get a lot more sympathy if they played in literally any other conference. But that was not a very good football game for about 3 quarters, and it turned into a real barn burner for the last quarter. So that was it ended up being a fun and memorable game eventually. Looking forward to next year. There are some familiar names at the top of your way too early top 25. One of them played in that game last Monday in Indianapolis. It is the Alabama Crimson Tide. This feels like a safe pick just about every year, but is there anything in particular that makes you think this is definitely an Alabama kind of year coming up?
Well, I think we've done a top 25 at Sporting. I've at least helped with it every year since 14, and I think we had Ohio State number 1 in 15. In there way too early, and Clemson one of those years. And that, we go with Alabama. I mean, at the end of the game, I don't think it was an accident that been singled out Bryce Young and Will Anderson, because they'll be the team leaders on that team next year, and they're going to be ranked number 1 to start the year. That's kind of a default setting of sorts. They'll have some competition. I mean, it starts with the next 2 on that list, obviously, but 6 college football playoff championships appearances. 3-3. I believe Gerd was the one that pointed out, I mean, how many times are we going to let them in if they're going to go? No, and that was a pretty good tweet by Tony on Monday night.
Yeah, they do tend to be a part of that 4-team tournament. If it expands to 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 at some point, they will probably be a part of it every single year after that too. The number 2 team, though, if it does expand, will probably also be a part of those tournaments every single year if they do go to 12. It is the Ohio State Buckeyes. They did not make it this year, but it sounds like you are pretty optimistic about their chances of potentially making the field next year.
Well, I mean, one of the things about this year, them not coming through against Michigan and winning the Big Ten championship, is we didn't get a chance to see them play that Georgia defense. I mean, that would have been the dream matchup, Ohio State's offense versus that Georgia defense. Now, I'll be honest and probably get booed a little bit. I think Georgia would have beat Ohio State this year. But next year, I mean, with C.J. Stroud coming back, a full complement of receivers, new defensive coordinator and Jim Knowles, friendly schedule, bookended with just monstrous home games against Notre Dame and Michigan. I think they'll reestablish themselves as the team to beat in the Big Ten, get back in the playoff, and business as usual.
Yeah, sometimes when I do this countdown, last year all summer I was counting down to the Minnesota game, and it was like, yeah, okay, like it'll be cool to have college football back. Those are legitimately potentially 2 of the 5 biggest regular season games in the entire nation, at least in terms of TV eyeballs. They probably will be. And that is as you said, that is the bookends of the regular season for Ohio State. Should be a pretty fun fall in Columbus, as they many of them do tend to be. Number 3, a little behind Ohio State, because a lot of that defense, that big nasty defense, is going to be playing on Sundays next year. The Georgia Bulldogs, they get a little bit of a post-championship glow, halo, grace period, I guess, but they should be, even without all the guys they're losing, they should be pretty good again next year.
Yeah, and to be clear, so this morning we're going to have, I put together kind of a composite, way too early top 25, looked at ours versus 8 other publications, because I like doing that. I like seeing what everybody else thinks and averaging out. And those 3 were unanimous across the board. Some people have Georgia 2, some people have Ohio State 3, but these top 3 teams, it's them and everybody else. And that's going to be this early story going into next season, because 4 through 25 is going to be a little bit of a crapshoot, but Georgia will be good. They've got enough talent that they've built through the recruiting classes. Yeah, they're going to lose some first round guys, but depending on what they do at quarterback, they still have Brock Bowers, they still have George Pickens. They're going to be pretty good on both sides.
Number 4, after that top 3, and I do agree that it seems like there is kind of 3, and then there's teams with a lot more questions, a little bit of a gap between 3 and 4 there. Number 4 is a team that I think a lot of people have maybe left for dead, and you might be right. It may be a little early to leave good old Dabo and his Clemson Tigers for dead. You have them number 4, and they've had a bit of a tumultuous offseason. They've lost a bunch of guys to the transfer portal, lost Brett Venables to the Oklahoma Sooners. They've lost a couple other assistants. I know their defensive line coach went with Venables to Oklahoma. It was not a great 2021 for Dabo, but it wasn't as bad as people remember. Probably they kind of lost a couple games early, and then everyone forgot about them. And then they looked at the end of the year, it was like, oh, they won 10 games again this year. It wasn't the disaster that it looked like it might be at one point. But why are you optimistic that Clemson really rights the ship next year?
Well, they've got 3 top 10 classes that are going to be a year older. It's important to remember one of those losses was to Georgia in the opener. That was a defensive rock for 3 quarters before Georgia pulled away. They need DJ to take the next step. They need some of those receivers to get a little bit better and have that passing game and offense going. And sometimes, I know Elliott and Venables have been there forever. Sometimes a coordinator switch works out, though. Freshens up the program. We've seen that at Ohio State before, where it's run past its course. So that, combined with the fact that they play SEC, and I still think they're the most talented team by far in that conference, makes it easy to them as a bounce back.
Yeah, and they do not have Georgia on the out of conference schedule there this year either. They have I looked it up a couple days ago, and it was not a particularly daunting schedule. So they may be in decent shape to make a pretty good run. Number 5, boy, I don't need to tell everyone who this team opens with. The old Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And boy, that week 1 game, if this is how the polls shake out, and week 1 is number 2 Ohio State versus number 5 Notre Dame, man, that is going to be quite a matchup. You're probably going to have a little bit of hype around that one. And, Notre Dame has an interesting schedule next year. They didn't have a particularly difficult one this year. Open in Columbus. They actually close going to USC and Lincoln Riley. And that might be, year 1, it's probably not going to be great, but that is a team that could, they could have a pretty challenging couple bookends to their schedule as well.
For sure. And obviously, Marcus Freeman returning to Ohio State, he made some comments that have, Ohio State's fans have taken and run with him, but he's Notre Dame coach now. So he's going to say things like that to get people to come to his program. So the energy around that, as somebody, I don't think they've played in the regular season since the home and home in the 90s. And I remember how much energy there was around those games. So Notre Dame's got to figure out quarterback. They've got a Pickerington kid, obviously, and Lorenzo Styles that will have a breakout year next year and maybe even be guarded by his brother a little bit. Who knows? If Sonny gets on the field, that's pretty cool. But because they're not in a conference, if they lose to Ohio State, they'll be on the verge of elimination on, I think it's September 4th. And that's just the casualty of not being in a conference.
Yeah, that's going to be definitely an issue for them because, they have the schedule where if they go undefeated, they're in and they don't have to win that conference championship game. If they're 11-1, they could be in, but you're probably behind any 12-1 conference champion. And so, yeah, you are eliminating potentially a lot of your margin for error, before Labor Day playing at Ohio State to open the season. Yeah, the Marcus Freeman comments obviously have gotten something of a mixed reaction from Ohio State fans, but as you said, he is the Notre Dame coach now. He is going to say things about why you should come to Notre Dame. That's kind of the job. So, and you're going to be recruiting against Ohio State quite a bit. So sometimes Ohio State may catch a few strays there. Number 6 is an interesting team. You talked earlier about seeing a team that hadn't won in a while, and how that was kind of fun and different. This is a team that has not won the national championship in a while. Texas A&M, I believe 1939 for them, the last time they won the championship. Jimbo has they have taken some strides there. They have signed some pretty significant classes, but you're in the SEC West. You got to get in over Bama. Unless you're 11-1 non-division champion that somehow sneaks in. I don't think they're going to catch Alabama off guard after beating Alabama this year. So that's that's going to be, that is a team that has a lot of talent and a lot of opportunity, but that they do not necessarily have the easiest road. They have to go through Alabama to get there.
Well, I'm going to spoil this for you on this composite top 25 we got going today. They are number 4. So across 10 publications, they're 4. They're very popular. And I think some of that is people are going to rank Notre Dame, Baylor, some other schools behind them anyway. But I mean, he's assembled a lot of talent. They proved they could beat Alabama. They lost a lot of games this year. That's the other end of it, is like, can they be consistent every week? I mean, I watched them get destroyed by Arkansas. And Arkansas is a team I'm actually pretty high on because they got their quarterback back. And I think Sam Pittman has something rolling there in Fayetteville that could be very interesting over the next couple of years. Plus, you're in the hardest division in college football that just added Brian Kelly at LSU, that has Lane Kiffin taking Ole Miss to New Year's Day 6 bowls. And you're like, off week game is having Mike Leach throw at you 80 times. So, I mean, it's not easy to win in that conference. And but yeah, they're really high on what Jimbo's going to do. And they're going to have enough talent. I mean, we'll see what they have at quarterback.
And number 7, after number 7, we're going to jump down to a couple others lower in the rankings, but I think people will figure out pretty quickly why I went down to number 7 on this list. Number 7, the Michigan Wolverines. And that is a team that is, had their kind of breakthrough season this year, beat Ohio State for the first time since 2011, won the Big Ten for the first time since 2004, made the college football playoff for the first time ever. But now they got to do it without Aiden Hutchinson. Now they got to do it without David Ajabo. Now they got to do it without Hassan Haskins. I mean, they lost a ton of talent. They do get Ronnie Bell back. That'll be interesting. And you've got, an interesting quarterback battle between Cade McNamara and JJ McCarthy, and will one or both of those guys stay, and on and on and on. So probably a little bit of a step back for Michigan, but it seems like you are not expecting a big step back for Michigan.
No, I mean, some of that's going to hinge around what they do at quarterback. Is JJ McCarthy going to take more snaps? I mean, Donovan Edwards is the playmaker that they have. They'll be healthy at receiver. Andrew Anthony showed that he could do some things. The offensive line should still be pretty good. So I anticipate they'll be all right on that side of the ball. Blake Corum back as well. Defensively, they're going to have to find that edge rush in another year in Mike McDonald's system. I still think they've got plenty of talent. The schedule early in the season set up for success again. This the $1 million question is Jim Harbaugh going to be the head coach? I mean, as of when we, talking about this now, I mean, is he going to be the Raiders coach? Is he going to be the Giants coach? I still think those rumors there's something to it this time, that he's at least getting looked at whether or not that happens.
Yeah. And there was a report, we talked about that on one of the shows last week. And, there were reports that he had been, openly telling recruits like, yeah, I am at least considering it. So yeah, definitely seems like there's a little more smoke to it, maybe a little more substance to it this time. As Bill said, as of when we're recording this, nothing has happened yet, but who knows what'll happen between now and when this show drops. You had two other Big Ten teams in the top 25, and then 2 teams that were not in the top 25. So I'm going to let you talk about whichever of these 4 you think is the most interesting conversation piece here. You have number 15, Michigan State, number 17, Iowa, both teams on Ohio State's schedule this year. No Wisconsin in the top 25, no Penn State in the top 25. Those are teams that I think you just sort of, if you were just filling this out without paying any attention to next season, any rosters or any of that, you just kind of like, if you were just sort of filling out a generic any year top 25, those are teams that would be in there, but they're not in there this year for you. So whichever of those you think is the most interesting conversation piece, you can hit on that real quick.
Oh, I mean, Michigan State, what do they do in response with Mel Tucker? And Jalen Berger's potential breakout candidate. I think they're the one that I had ranked highest, obviously. I've seen all those other three teams ranked higher, between Wisconsin, whoever wins the Big Ten West out of Wisconsin, Iowa, or Minnesota. Penn State's kind of off the radar. They're going to be this year's Michigan in terms of attention. Remember, Michigan wasn't ranked coming in that last season. And I think Penn State's going to be a little bit like that, where the talent's there, but they went off the rails a little bit this year. So, I mean, Michigan State, Mel Tucker, are they serious in year 3 after that hefty contract he got about challenging the Buckeyes or the Wolverines? And I guess it'll always be there with Michigan, but for me, it's like that 56-7 score still stuck with me a little bit, that they're that far behind the Buckeyes, even with a pretty good team.
Yeah, that one was still that one that looks surprising in retrospect too, because I mean, Michigan State was not fantastic, but they weren't terrible, and they had a pretty good Peach Bowl against Pitt, and they probably were not nearly as bad as they looked on that day. Ohio State was probably not quite as good as they looked on that day, but yeah, that one was definitely one that was a little bit of an outlier, but it is not the first time Ohio State has done that to a supposedly pretty decent Michigan State team in the last few years either. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see how Mel Tucker can kind of put it together coming up for the next year. Before I let you go, I wanted to mention this. You are also a part of the documentary Fight for Football, Saving the 2020 Season. That's something that a number of Buckeye Scoop folks were in, Tony Gerdeman and Mark Givler and myself. But we had reporters from all, covering all sorts of teams across the country. That was something we did a special screening of back in August. And then they kind of went to work. The documentary folks went to work really putting together a final cut and like really going through and doing the legal process and getting everything formatted and ready to go. That is expected to be out on streaming devices later this month. We do not have an exact date. The filmmakers will let us know as soon as we do, and then we're going to be talking about it a whole lot more. But Bill was in that. Bill had a lot of really good insight in that. My wife walked out of the screen that we went to and said, "That Bill Bender, I like him. He knows his stuff." I was like, all right. He's okay. He's not bad. We like Bill too. But one of the themes of that documentary, it's about this, the fight to save the 2020 Big Ten season and the 2020 college football season on the whole. But one of the themes that developed that you talked about a little bit in that film is how that season, which is now a couple seasons in the past, is actually still going to be impactful moving forward because of the way it sort of positioned Greg Sankey of the SEC as really the sport's really true leader right now. There is no national college football commissioner, but Greg Sankey sort of positioned himself as the leader of the sport heading into a time where with conference realignment and the college football playoff expansion and NIL stuff and all this stuff changing all at once, that season and where it put Greg Sankey could have a major impact on the sport moving forward. Yeah. And, the scar, I don't want to say scars, but just where we're at. I mean, with the portal and expansion and everything that has happened, I mean, we're in an environment right now. I sat outside the meeting where the commissioner's trying to figure out expansion, and the SEC is very prominent. And Greg Sankey, because of how they weighted that season, I've said that's kind of the theme of that. We talk about that a little bit in the documentary, how their wait and see attitude ended up paying off. I mean, their schedule, I think they had 2 games that got canceled. 2 because of COVID. That miraculous. They had Alabama's best team of all time that got to win a national championship. Probably Saban's best national championship team, I'd say. And now they're leading the conversation about expansion. And Greg Sankey is, the most pronounced commissioner there is. And everybody's still trying to keep up with the SEC. We saw that on Monday night. I know people don't like to hear it, but at the end of the day, Georgia and Alabama were the 2 best teams in the country. The SEC has a ton of clout through the recruiting it's done. And that season, it'll have an impact for years to come. Well, that you can find that documentary coming out again. The plan is a little later on this month. You should be able to stream it on some, pretty common streaming platforms. We will get you all that information as soon as that comes out. But go ahead and save a Saturday night for that in a few weeks, and it should be a fun little taste of college football as we are starting to get into the college football offseason. So, Bill, thank you for joining me. Always appreciate your insight on the national college football picture. Hey, thanks so much, Tom. I'll talk to you soon. Well, thanks again to Bill, who is not only one of my wife's favorites, but also one of my favorites. Love having Bill on the show. Great insight. You can find him at the Sporting News, just sportingnews.com, or you can find him on Twitter at BillBender92. Fantastic follow, lots of great insight, and just a fantastic voice on college football nationally on the whole. So worth a follow. And I will link his way too early top 25 in the post for this podcast on the front page of BuckeyeScoop.com. Also, make sure you check out all of our other great podcasts. You can find them on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, you name it. We are there. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. You can subscribe right there. You can also leave us a 5-star rating and review, which will help other folks find those shows. And finally, if you prefer to watch on YouTube, you can just find us at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. If you're watching there, hit that bell, subscribe to our channel. Then you get notified every time we post a new video, every time we do a new live show, anytime we do any kind of new player coach interviews, game highlights from high schools, camps, whatever. It's all there at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.